Okay, today we are going to talk about adding and subtracting mixed numbers. So you remember that a number is a whole number and a proper fraction. When you put those two together, that makes a mixed number. Sometimes when adding, you may have to add two mixed numbers together to be able to get a new one. So when you add it, first thing you have to do is you have to add the whole numbers. So that's the first thing we add. So when we add our whole numbers, we've all done basic addition. So 3 plus 2 is 5. Then what I need to do is I need to add my fractions. So if it confuses you to see all that up there, what I would do is I would just rewrite the two fractions out, add them, 1/3 plus 1/3, our numerators, 1 plus 1 is 2. Denominator doesn't change, 2/3. And we reconnect it back to our whole number that we had, and that is how we add a mixed number. Now it can get a little tricky sometimes, though, if the denominators are not the same. So if I had something like adding 2 1/3 plus 2 1/4, I would do the same thing originally with my two whole numbers, and 3 plus 2 is 5. Then I would need to add my fractions, so I've got 1/3 plus 1/4. We know from what we've previously learned that if the denominators are not the same, I cannot add them the way they are. I have to force the denominators to be the same. And the way that we force the denominators to be the same is that we do a sideways t-chart or an equivalency table for each fraction. So I do one for 1/3 and then I do one for 1/4. So when I'm doing mine for 1/3, I do my multiples of my numerator, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My multiples of my denominator, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Multiples of my numerator, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then my denominator, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. Then what I'm able to do after I have that together is now I can identify the common denominator. So I know from looking at it that these are my two common denominators, 12 and 12. So I rewrite my fractions out here, 4 12s plus 3 12s, and I add it up. 4 plus 3 is 7. 12 and 12 makes 12 because the denominator that does not change. So when I've added these two fractions, I found an equivalent one that had the same denominator, added them, so my answer would be 5 and 7 twelfths. Now sometimes when you are going to add two mixed numbers, you will get a fraction that is improper. Remember that when we are adding mixed numbers, the only way for it to be truly a mixed number is for it to be, let me find a better one than 2/3. Well, let me change this to 2/3. 3 2/3 plus 2 3/4. We'll do that one. So, remember that when we have a mixed number, these fractions that are attached to my whole number, those are proper fractions. You will never see a mixed number like this, where it has a whole number and an improper fraction where the numerator is bigger. If you don't remember what an improper fraction is, go back and watch your improper fraction video. So here, you will never see a fraction like this. So when I am adding these together, I add my two whole numbers like I always do. 3 plus 2 is 5. And then I have to add my two fractions. Those do not have the same denominator, so I have to force them to have the same denominator by finding a fraction that is equivalent to 2/3 and a fraction that is equivalent to 3/4 that they have a common denominator. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. When you're making these tables and then you go and try to find a common denominator, make sure you are comparing the denominators, because some kids will accidentally compare a denominator and a numerator, and you don't want to do that. You want to compare your two denominators. So when I find a common denominator, I find that it is 12, and what I'll do then is I'll do 8 twelfths plus 9 twelfths, and I know my denominator stays the same, and 9 and 8 makes 17. This is an improper fraction. I cannot leave it as an improper fraction. I have to change it to a mixed number. So how do I do that? I do division. 17, let me rewrite that, did that wrong. 17 divided by 12. 12 goes into 17 one time, and that's 12. 17 minus 12 is 5. So now I'm done. There's nothing left to bring down. My whole groups is my whole number. My leftover is my pieces, and my denominator never changes. So I have 1 and 5/12. Well, now I need to go back and put it with my 5, because 1 and 5/12 is not my answer. So now I have to think, well, I already had the 5 from adding my two whole groups, and then when I add those two fractions, it gets me 1 and 5/12. So 5 and 1, my two whole numbers, will now make 6. And then there is no fraction over here, so all I have is 6 and 5/12. And that is my answer when I add and subtract mixed numbers.